Shalom from Israel to all of Daystar viewers around the world. I am Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible, when David said in Psalm 43:3, "O send out your light and your truth. Let them lead us. Let them bring us to your holy hill and to your tabernacle." And God says in Zechariah 8:31, "I will return to Zion and dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. Always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rome.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, the European Union has decided to sanction Iranian oil. The European Union has approved an oil embargo against Iran in a move which brings EU policy in line with that of the United States. The action is intended to pressure the rogue nation into resuming negotiations. During an EU meeting in Brussels, foreign ministers approved an immediate ban on all contracts to import, buy, or transport Iranian crude oil. Countries with existing agreements with Iran have until July 1st of this year to terminate their contracts. Oil is Tehran's main source of foreign income. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been calling for crippling sanctions, including an oil embargo, for months. He said that the sanctions are a step in the right direction. Iran has rejected the sanctions as psychological warfare and has said that the decision to freeze the assets of Iran's central bank will only worsen the standoff over its nuclear program.
In a lateral move, the United States has blacklisted Iran's Bank Jarat. It is the third largest Iranian bank with more than 2,000 branches across the country. The Belarus-based financial institution was found to be providing services to parties already sanctioned for involvement in Iran's nuclear weapons program. U.S. Undersecretary for Terror Finance David Cohen said that the sanctions against the bank will deepen Iran's financial isolation, make its access to hard currency even more tenuous, and further impair Iran's ability to finance its illicit nuclear program.
Iran exports 2.6 million barrels of oil per day on the international market, making it the world's fifth largest oil exporter. In response to the news of the heightened sanctions, the hardline Islamic Republic threatened to block the Strait of Hormuz if there is any disruption in the sale of its oil. Last month, the vice president of Iran threatened that not even one drop of oil would be allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz if sanctions were imposed on Iran's crude exports. 1/5 of the world's oil passes through the narrow Persian Gulf Seaway, and many nations have said that closing it would be an act of war.
The USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier has returned to the Persian Gulf. Escorted by 2 destroyers and a guided missile cruiser, the Nimitz-class supercarrier was met by the British Royal Naval Fleet and a French naval vessel as it passed through the Strait of Hormuz last week. This was the first time that a U.S. ship has entered the crucial waterway since Iran threatened to fire on the U.S. aircraft carrier earlier this month. A spokesman for the British Ministry of Defense said that a French vessel and the HMS Argyle joined a U.S. carrier group transiting through the Strait of Hormuz to underline the unwavering international commitment to maintaining rights of passage under international law.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has defiantly rejected a proposal by the Arab League to form a Syrian unity government. The plan, which calls for Assad's resignation as president and the appointment of one of his deputies in his place, is being condemned by top Syrian officials and called a plan for conspiracy against Syria. The Arab League has asked the United Nations to endorse its peace plan for the strife-torn nation. The League announced Tuesday that it had decided to withdraw its monitors from their mission, which failed to curb the violence that began 10 months ago and has claimed the lives of more than 5,400 people.
Syria's Foreign Minister Walid Muallim is warning that Russia will not accept any foreign intervention in Syria and that ties between Moscow and Damascus are deep-rooted. In a show of support for Bashar al-Assad's government, Russia has contracted to sell 36 Yak 130 fighter planes to Syria for $550 million. The Yak-130 is a twin-engine combat trainer jet that can also be used to attack ground targets. Russia has been supplying the country with arms in the midst of the violent clashes between the Syrian government and opposition forces. Last May, the European Union imposed an arms embargo on Damascus, but Syria has continued to receive weapons from Russia. Just last week, Cyprus allowed the passage of a ship bound for Syria carrying dangerous cargo, and reports have confirmed that Syria received the delivery of anti-ship cruise missiles from Moscow.
Israeli and Palestinian negotiators met last week for the fourth round of exploratory talks in hopes of restarting official peace negotiations. Hosted by royal invitation in Jordan, Israeli negotiator Yitzhak Mocho has not released any details of the talks, saying that the Jordanians have requested total discretion of all subject matter discussed at the meetings. The chief Palestinian negotiator has not been so discreet. In a letter sent to the Israeli government, the United States, the United Nations, the European Union, and Russia, the Palestinian Authority demanded the release of 23 Palestinian terrorists, including Marwan Barghouti. Barghouti is serving 5 life sentences in an Israeli prison for directing suicide bombings that killed hundreds of Israeli civilians and soldiers. Barghouti, who is known as the leader of the First and Second Intifadas, holds a great deal of influence in the Fatah party, and many say that if he were to be released, he would succeed Mahmoud Abbas as the leader of the party. Israel has denied requests for his release numerous times, including during the negotiations to free kidnapped IDF soldier Gilad Shalit. Both sides have said that the exploratory talks have not brought them any closer to official negotiations. Israel insists on the cessation of violence and the recognition of its right of existence. The Palestinians are demanding that Israel must release terrorists and cease all building activity in Judea and Samaria before they will engage in direct peace negotiations with Israel.
2 members of the Hamas terror group have been found hiding at the Jerusalem headquarters of the International Committee of the Red Cross. In a statement, the humanitarian organization said that Khalid Abu Arfa and Mohammed Tota sought refuge in the compound on July 1, 2010 to escape arrest by Israeli authorities. The Red Cross mission statement declares that the organization will not take sides in hostilities nor engage at any time in controversies of a political, racial, religious, or ideological nature. However, the ICRC harbored the wanted terrorists and allowed them to live at the Red Cross headquarters for over 1 year, during which time the organization provided them with food, electricity, and an area for a protest tent. This is the second time that the Red Cross has been found to harbor wanted terrorists in Jerusalem. Last year, Israeli police arrested another wanted member of Hamas at the site. Despite claims of political neutrality, the Red Cross has repeatedly intervened in politics in Israel. Last year, Israel accused the Red Cross of organizing a rally held outside its Gaza headquarters, protesting the detention of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. According to Israeli officials, such activity compromises the neutrality claimed by the Red Cross. ICRC documents refer to the areas of Judea and Samaria as occupied territories, and there have been recent reports that the organization's ambulances were used to smuggle weapons from Iran into Lebanon for Hezbollah to use against Israel in the war of 2006.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is demanding that the Mufti of Jerusalem be investigated for incitement. Sheikh Mohammed Hussein cited religious texts that refer to killing Jews during his speech marking the 47th anniversary of the Fatah movement. Quoting from the Haditha text, Hussein told the fanatic Fatah supporters that the end of days will not come until they fight the Jews and Christians in a religious war. He declared that the killing of Jews will hasten the Muslim era of redemption. Yehuda Weinstein, the Attorney General of Israel, has been directed to order an investigation against the top Muslim cleric for the comments. He will also investigate the Palestinian Authority's culpability for airing the hateful speech on the official PA television station. Palestinian officials have endorsed the speech, and some have echoed the creed that the war with the Jews is a war with the descendants of apes and pigs. The United Kingdom's Minister to the Middle East, Alastair Burt, said, "I condemn the inflammatory words used by the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem at the recent Fatah event. To refer to the Jewish people in such a way and to talk of killing Jews is anti-Semitism, pure and simple."
This week, a subcommittee of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee at the Israeli Parliament met to discuss the importance of Bible-believing Christian support for the State of Israel. Chaired by member of Knesset Robert Iletov of the Israel Beitenu Party, the meeting was attended by MKs, officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Tourism, Internal, Public Diplomacy, and Diaspora Affairs ministries, as well as representatives from the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus. MK Iletov called evangelical Christians some of Israel's greatest allies, and a call was made to the Ministry of Interior to finalize a decision that would allow for more Bible-believing Christians to obtain long-term visas so that they may remain in Israel and contribute even more to the country. And that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here in Jerusalem at our beautiful rooftop studio. Our guest today is Dr. Jürgen Buehler, Executive Director of the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem. Dr. Buehler, thank you for coming on the show.
Josh, thanks for having me today.
Well, the International Christian Embassy here in Jerusalem is the largest and most venerable organization in Israel for Christian Zionists. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, Josh, in 1980, the Israeli Knesset released a law which was called the Jerusalem Law. This law stated that Jerusalem is the eternal and undivided capital of the state of Israel. And as this law was passed in protest, all the embassies which have been located here in Jerusalem, they closed their doors and moved to Tel Aviv, where until today all the representation of the international community can be found. In the very same year, in 1980, a group of Christians gathered in Jerusalem and they met together for a conference which was the conference of the Feast of Tabernacles. And in that first conference of the Feast of Tabernacles, they decided if the world is abandoning today Jerusalem, then we as Christians, we have to come to that city and we establish an international Christian embassy representing millions of Bible believers all over the world as a statement of love and support for the Jewish people.
Well, of course, your flagship event is the Feast of Tabernacles. It's the largest tourist event in Jerusalem, in fact, in Israel every year. Can you tell us a little bit about the Feast of Tabernacles?
Well, Josh, the Feast of Tabernacles, it's a true miracle. We are surprised ourselves how year by year thousands of pilgrims are coming to Jerusalem to celebrate a Jewish feast, the Feast of Sukkot, with us. And it's always a very extraordinary conference with high professional musicians and worship leaders from all over the world. But most importantly, it's a conference also where some of the top leaders of the Christian Zionist movement and of the evangelical world are gathering in Jerusalem to worship the King of Kings in the city of the great King.
Well, of course, the nations of the world are asked to come up to Jerusalem during the Feast of Tabernacles. It's a miracle to see it happen year after year, no matter what the situation is in Israel. You were just awarded last week the Tourism Award, together with the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus Award, for your commitment to tourism and helping Israel in the tourist economy. What was that like for you?
Well, it was one of the greatest honors in my life to sit together with members of Knesset in Jerusalem, with representatives of the Ministry of Tourism and other leading Jewish organizations, and to be awarded. And in particular for me, coming from Germany, this was important and very meaningful for me in particular to get an award like that and a recognition like that for the work what we do in regard to tourism here in this land.
Well, of course, Christian Zionists are appreciating Israel like never before. I just heard recently that in Haifa, they're actually going to name one of the streets after the International Christian Embassy. That is unprecedented. What do you think about that?
Well, I just can say this is a God thing. 2 years ago, we have been approached by a Jewish friend of ours in Haifa. He already had a small apartment where he was taking care for Holocaust survivors. And he asked us, he said, Jürgen, can you help us to expand this apartment? We want to add some more units to that. And thanks God we had the funds to do that. But I was looking at the building and I asked him, Shimon, what about purchasing the entire building? And within a few weeks, we went to our friends in Germany, to our worldwide supporters, and we were surprised within a few weeks, the money came in not only to purchase that building, but to renovate it and to turn it into a very beautiful first ever house for Holocaust survivors in Israel. And we were surprised that the funds even continued to come in. At the end, as it stands today, we actually could purchase 2 buildings on that street. And as of today, every single building on that street is being used in order to help Holocaust survivors. This is a unique project which was broadcasted along the Israeli media. Every news station reported about that. And it's now the first street which is a united community where Holocaust survivors are living, can share the experience, can share what they went through their difficult time. And as I said, it's a first of all home which is exclusively dedicated to help Holocaust survivors. And we were surprised a few weeks ago to learn that the municipality of Haifa decided to change the street name into the street of the International Christian Embassy.
Amazing. Well, you know, one of the new exciting developments for Israel Now News is that starting next week, we're going to have a new section in the program called the ICEJ Report. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Josh, I'm very excited about this coming partnership and for us joining you on Israel Now News. What we will be doing in these coming weeks, we will share a few moments out of the Word of God, out of the experience of Christians being active here in the land of Israel, and add a Christian perspective to Israel Now News. And I'm as excited as you are to partner in this great project together to bring the truth out from the city of truth, the city of Jerusalem.
Dr. Buehler, there are literally millions of people watching this show. What message would you have to our viewers?
Israel today is in one of the most critical moments in its history. And Israel today needs the support of every single evangelical Christian worldwide. They need the prayers of the Christian community, but they also need the practical support of the Christian community. We want to invite you to visit the Holy Land, to visit the land of Israel, to reconnect to your roots, but also make a very public statement that you as a Bible-believing Christians, you are standing in these critical times at the side of the Jewish people.
Well, thank you, Dr. Buehler, for being on the show. And thank you for watching Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, Shining Light from Israel.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come explore Jerusalem, where Jesus opened blind eyes. Visit the hills of Galilee, where Jesus fed the multitude. Stroll through Capernaum, where Jesus lived and taught and healed. To learn more about standing where it all happened in Israel, visit www.goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
In addition to the topics discussed in our first 2 videos, the subject of refugees is one of the core issues for understanding the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Who are the refugees? Why, more than 60 years later, is this still an issue? Let's look at the facts. So, how did it all begin? In May 1948, the local Arab population was joined by 7 Arab countries in a collective attempt to destroy the newly re-established Jewish state. Encouraged by Arab leaders who promised they would return as victors, and later on, as a result of their failed war efforts, an estimated 500,000 Arabs fled to neighboring Arab territories. But is this the full picture? I'd like you to take a look at the refugees in these photos. Many people assume they are Arab refugees fleeing Israel. But in fact, they are innocent Jewish refugees forced out of Arab countries. This map tells the full story. There were far more Jewish refugees than Arab refugees. Over 850,000 Jews from ancient Jewish communities predating Islam and the Arab occupation of the Middle East were forced out of their homes. Jews were stripped of their citizenship in many countries, and their property was confiscated. In contrast, 160,000 Arabs accepted Israel's offer to remain, and today there are more than 1 million Israeli Arab citizens with full equal rights living in Israel. Now, here is a question. Have you heard of any Jewish refugee camps? I didn't think so. The Jewish refugees were immediately welcomed and absorbed by Israel or by other nations. Then why, after more than 60 years, are the Arab Palestinian refugees still not welcomed and absorbed among their own brethren? And how could their numbers have grown from 500,000 to 4.7 million? The sad reality is that the Arab refugees never had a chance. Attempts at resettlement were blocked by a variety of discriminatory laws enacted in Arab countries, such as a ban on receiving citizenship, with the exception of Jordan, blocking them from entering many professions, restrictions on owning land, restrictions on movement, and a denial of education and health services. Sir Alexander Galloway, a former director of the UN Refugee Agency in Jordan, gave the reason for this discrimination. Quote, "The Arab nations do not want to solve the Arab refugee problem. They want to keep it as an open sore, as a weapon against Israel." Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser explained the effect of this weapon, aimed at overwhelming Israel demographically, with generations of refugees cultivated to hate. Quote, "If the refugees return to Israel, Israel will cease to exist." And what role did the United Nations play? Sadly, they were less than helpful. While all refugees in the world are assisted by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, a separate agency, UNRWA, was established specifically for the Palestinians. Why can't the Palestinian refugees share an agency with the refugees of Bosnia, Congo, or Darfur, to name a few? The answer is because while the United Nations Central Refugee Agency helps refugees resettle, the United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency helps perpetuate their status by applying unique criteria. For example, refugees lose their status after receiving citizenship from a recognized country. Palestinian refugees do not. Refugees cannot transmit their status from generation to generation. Palestinian refugees can. Refugees are encouraged to resettle in other countries or integrate in their host countries. UNRWA avoids such policies. The United Nations spends on a single Palestinian refugee almost 3 times more than on a non-Palestinian refugee, and employs over 30 times the staff. The bottom line is, throughout the 20th century, the UN found durable solutions for tens of millions of refugees, while the Palestinian Refugee Agency has found, well, none. Some people may suggest this is hypocrisy. Let me share something personal. My father's family was forced out of Algeria. They and another 600,000 Jews from Arab states resettled in Israel. History has proven that resettlement and integration helped tens of millions of refugees during the 20th century reclaim their lives. However, the Palestinian refugees are trapped between Arab leaders unwilling to accept their brothers and UN agencies who do not apply equal and universal principles to all refugees. Is this just?
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come explore Jerusalem, where Jesus opened blind eyes. Visit the hills of Galilee, where Jesus fed the multitude. Stroll through Capernaum, where Jesus lived and taught and healed. To learn more about standing where it all happened in Israel, visit www.goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
Stay tuned for Torah Truth from Zion.
Shalom, this is Ari Abramowitz with thelandofisrael.com. I'm here to discuss this week's Torah portion in the book of Exodus, the portion called Bo. Well, this is the culmination of the redemption of the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt. Every year, the holiday of Passover, we have a Pesach Seder. the Seder, where we sit down and we eat matzah and we have the bitter herbs and we relive this exodus from Egypt. Now, the main part of this process was the Paschal Lamb. This is understood by many different groups in many different ways, but the way the Jewish people see the Paschal Lamb is fascinating and illuminating of what Judaism and God really demands of us. Now think about this Paschal Lamb. It was the night before the Exodus, and the Jewish people didn't know what would happen. The lamb was the god of the Egyptians. They worshiped the lamb. They were not ever slaughtering lambs. We were commanded from God to slaughter a lamb, to put its blood outside our homes on our doorpost and skewer it outside. We couldn't cook it by cutting it up and putting it in the oven. We had to skewer it whole outside our homes. Now imagine what would happen if the redemption didn't happen, if God didn't come and rescue the Jewish people and bring us out of Egypt. What would have happened is every Jew that had the blood of the lamb on his doorpost, that had a skewered god of Egypt outside his home, would be killed. No question about it. So we were commanded to cast our lot with God. We were commanded to put our faith in the God of Israel and not in ourselves, to fear God and not to fear the Egyptians. That has always been the request and the demand that God makes of us. Even when we got to the Red Sea, before it parted, the Egyptians had their entire military force coming after us, and the sea was not parting until one man, Nachshon ben Aminadav, a prince from the tribe of Judah, he walked so far into the sea that there was no turning back. He would have drowned at that point. And only at that point of no return did the water finally part. Because we can have faith, and that's good, and that's necessary, but we need to live that faith. And this, the land of Israel, is the land where you are able to live your faith. And we want you to come and join us in the land of living faith, because this is the place where you can truly meet God. I'm Ari Abramowitz from thelandofisrael.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and shalom from Jerusalem.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Elrom.
And I'm Erin Viner. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.